And nobody come. All right, so should we, all right, we're right further. Hope you all heard that. Yeah.
Let's call the meeting to order. At
Okay.
6:40.
We should need a microphone. So. We will use that one. Well, then you'll
I'll do the roll
you'll
call.
be screen down.
Jack, you can hear?
I'm here.
I'll go over there and get my hair.
There is not, Bill here, there is, Margaret here. Six out of seven. 7 out of 7.
Hey, and Terry's here. He is, yes. Yeah. All right, what a lovely surprise.
Okay, next item is oral communication, plan for speakers from. Speak to the open space and committee, on items not on tonight's agenda.
Speak, will comment to the problems that he's having. I want to do anybody that is listening to this from home to come to the school. It's the viewing and audio is exceptional here. We are very apologetic for the problems that you're all having. We're going to carry on with the meeting. This is Betsy Morgan here. Thank you.
Anybody online?
Yeah, we have those online. So we have a full house.
And you also have Maria online.
And Maria Southgate's online. And Karen Askey's and just texted online. Great. And we have two members in the audience, Nancy Powell and Mr. Maroney.
So would you guys like to, address the commission on items not on tonight's agenda? So we'll move on to item 3, approval of the minutes. Draft minutes of February 5th, 2026. Or someone to do.
Well, I warned you is that I was here. The minutes don't say that.
I think it caught me as being there. The minutes, no?
I'm just looking at the minutes. And I'm pressing up to that page. Anyway,
Oh, my
I think that was here.
This is-
I'll report that.
A very important oversight on part of the secretary. I would fire myself. But then I will add your name.
We're gonna fetch your salary.
By the way, are these notes, the minutes, Betsy?
They've come off Zoom, well, Jackie helped me, sent me a complete transcript of the entire meeting. And then I did I would call them verbatim-ish minutes, ish being I dropped out a lot, the unnecessary stuff. I mean, not a lot, I dropped out all the unnecessary bonds and runs and some unnecessary wording that was fluff. But yes, and may I just speak to that for a moment to say, I wouldn't be able to do minutes that are this comprehensive. And I think that the staff function that is building to the decisions that we're gonna take on tonight deserve a more robust unpacking so that people who are not with us regularly, such as the town council, can work their way through our decisions with the help of the notes, which I personally find easier going than watching the entire YouTube.
So, other than, this thing, Gary, the, roll call. Anything else? Okay. Jack, do you have anything?
I'm sorry, was that a question to me?
Yeah, well, did you have anything to add to the minutes?
Yes, very happy.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to approve them?
If I'm allowed, if I'm allowed to make the motion, I'm happy to make a motion.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that passes unanimously. Okay. Next item on the agenda is 4A, draft committee letter for committee discussion and action obtaining legal counsel for the town review of the hotlines. Betsy, you have a moment?
Thank you, Chair before.
You have that.
So for listeners who were not at our last meeting, tonight's agenda, this is Betsy Morgan. Tonight's agenda is the result of and builds on the Open Space Committee meeting of April the 2nd. If you want to know how the committee arrived at the point we are now, all told, it's been a 3-year journey. Recently, though, we reached an inflection point. A very brief summary of the April 2nd meeting is MidPenn's plan 1 month from now to present the board with one preferred Hawthorne's access option, that being either option 9 or option 10. They intend to move directly into the lengthy CEQA process and put off engaging with the town until the tail end. Though that is their choice to make, the project still very much requires town consent in the form of permits and zoning. This committee's intention is to afford high-quality information to our town's decision makers, along with the ask and the funds to hire legal counsel with some degree of hope that the town and MidPenn can reach agreement that there's good reason to work constructively and creatively together sooner rather than later. It would preserve a lot of time, talent, and taxpayer funds. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation of the letter to Nona. She will walk us through the draft letter and attachments, but first to acknowledge the tremendous effort Nona took to coalesce and organize the key issues of concern and the exciting possibility that appear in the draft letter before us. It's been a real labor of land. Thanks.
Betsy. I want to say first of all that this is the 11th hour for us, and no one wants to be making decisions at the 11th hour, but that's where we are. So the decision before the committee tonight is whether we want to send a letter to the council recommending that the town secure legal counsel in order to engage with MidPenn. And if we do want to send a letter, we need to write it. The agenda has a draft letter for us to review, to edit, or to rewrite as needed. The first paragraph, which I think I could share on the screen, but I can't, is intended to state the need for legal counsel in broad terms. So I guess, should I read it? Does everyone have it in front of them?
I trust that the people who are interested in watching from home do. But for the benefit of those who are here, if you're able to connect with our agenda, you could track through the inclusionary pieces in
Now,
the
why don't you go ahead and read?
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll read it. If we want to make edits or rewrites as we're going through it, we can do that. I have it in front of me in Word, and I review it in track images so that we actually rewrite it in real time as needed, if that works for everyone. And in fact, it actually would be better if someone else reads it, if I'm going to be doing the changes.
Now read.
Great.
We are writing to avert you to the status of MidPenn's plans for opening the Hawthornes for public access, and to recommend that the town secure legal counsel quickly to represent the town in engagement with MidPenn. That's, the preamble, first paragraph. Next paragraph, After 15 years of studies and planning, Midfin is now one board decision away from starting the CEQA process in July 2026, to be followed by a public comment on the CEQA document in the spring of 2027, and then CEQA certification and approval for the final Hawthorne's area plan in the summer of 2027. There's a figure one, referred to this. This is the 11th hour, of pre-CEQA plan for the Hawthorne of Midpen. Next paragraph. A lot is at stake. For example, the Hawthorne plans 2 parking lot options are in the scenic hillside southeast of Alpine Road, the Alpine Trail, adjacent to the town's busiest crosswalks and intersection, Alpine Road and Portola Road. The hillside is a mixture of meadow and oak woodland. It is a prominent feature of the Alpine Scenic Board, which is now recognized in regional planning as a priority conservation area. Both of the planned parking options are scaled for 50 cars and require removal of significant trees, like significant cut and fill, in construction of a roadway and permeable concrete surface, retaining walls, and a screening berm upslope of the Alpine Trail. The town's safe and scenic buffer along the heavily used trail and transportation artery would be altered dramatically. Residents may have viewed the Hawthorne's Conservation Easement, Appendix A, as insurance against impacts such as these, but no other parking designs are considered in the plan. The bigger picture is that the Hawthorne's is a unique asset for Portola Valley in multiple respects. In addition to its diversity of natural habitats, there are visible legacies of the region's agricultural past and structures that likely merit state and national recognition for their historic quality. Appendix B describes how the open space, agricultural, and settled areas are woven together in a manner that argues against Midpen's decision to separate the historic district from the remainder. The Open Space Committee considers the Hawthorne's so significant and right-sized as town open space that acquisition should be considered. The town manager has discretionary funds from the Open Space Fund to obtain legal capital for that purpose, and the town council can increase the discretionary limit. Right sizing should apply to every aspect of the Hawthornes. We're providing sufficient parking, public access to the Hawthornes is as much the goal for the town as it is for Midpen. Residents are all too familiar with the consequences of inadequate parking at Midpen's Windy Hill open space. The question is how much parking is needed for a 79-acre parcel, with a 1.5 mile trail, and how those needs will change with greater use of e-bikes, ride services, and future modes of travel. Town committees and residents have informally suggested a range of parking possibilities that would meet the needs for parking and avoid the environmental harm of the plan's options. They also have ideas regarding trails, trail connections, and the historic structures of the Hawthornes. If Midpen approves the draft Hawthorne's area plan and a project description for CEQA at its meeting of May 13th, the plan provides a basis for informal coordination between the town and Midpen before the CEQA meeting. Before the CEQA process begins. The Midpen defers input until the CEQA document is completed
likely a year later. The secret document will be available for public and agency review. Either way, the town will be best positioned to provide input by obtaining legal counsel as soon as possible, forcing equally on focused equally on the potential acquisition of the Hawthorns by the town. We urge you to provide sufficient funds from the Open Space Fund for this purpose. Respectfully, the Open Space Committee.
So I just want to add that the critical thing is that there are three kinds of legal counsel we need. One is to informally coordinate with MidPen if they're willing. The other is to comment on the secret document when it's done, if we can't coordinate ahead of time. And then the third is to consider what the pros and cons and possibilities might be for acquisition. So I think taken together that justifies using the open space fund and the town manager's discretionary funds from that, together with any increase that the town council might allow in that. We just need to tell them. I might add that the agenda packet and has the two appendices that go with the 2-page letter. The first appendix is the conservation easement for the Hawthorns. I don't know, it's many pages. But we included that because that demonstrates probably better than anything else why legal counsel is needed. It's a legal document and it's complicated. We have highlighted some sections that are particularly pertinent to the questions before us, and I can read some of those if that would be helpful. But I think that demonstrates better than anything else of why legal counsel is needed to both engage with MidPen on the Hawthorns area plan or to think about the possibility of acquisition by the town.
I think the issue that the open space, the conservation easement, brings up are the limitations on nearly every activity, including commercial activities, including adding new utilities to the site, grading, drainage, and the parking lot, almost by definition, to me, is antithetical, to supporting the open space protections, included in the conservation easement, that the property came with, and is being, and is held by, the Open Space Trust. So to me, there's a basic challenge of the parking lot planning and or the parking lot location as a consequence of the conservation easement because of, the thousands of yards of grading, and additional drainage improvements, and paving that would be necessary, to do either of the option 9 or 10 plans, that the MidPen board is considered. Unless there's objections, go ahead.
If I may, actually just read a couple of the sentences from the conservation easement to demonstrate your point. So on page 5 of the easement, item E is tree cutting. So let me just say that either parking option would require removal of trees that are considered significant by the change. So item B says tree cutting. The cutting down or other removal of live trees except for 20 required for safety, fire protection, or sound use for management purposes, such as to prevent the spread of disease to other trees. And subject to the prior written approval of grantee, that's the Peninsula Open Space Trust, which approval shall not be unreasonably withheld, is prohibited. Any removal shall be performed in accordance with all federal, state, and local applicable laws. So that's one instance where they're proposing to do something which isn't justified by the conservation easement. Another, on the next page, page 16, and natural character. Activities such as clearing, stripping of native vegetation, grading, or storage of materials that would clearly degrade the scenic and natural character of the real property is prohibited. And then finally, I'll just point out that in the two maps that are in the agenda packet as part of the letter, so parking option 9 and parking option 10, there is a dashed red line to be added to show the boundary between what's called the improved portion of the Hawthorns and the unimproved portion. And everything to the left of that red line is considered unimproved, and everything to the right was part of the improved portion in the conservation easement. On page 8, letter I says that if the real property is ever conveyed to the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District or any similar governmental or non-governmental entity intending to use the real property for public open space and passive recreational uses, construction of a limited staging area, gravel parking lot, pit toilets, wood rail fencing, trail markers, etc., around the perimeter of the improved portion as necessary to facilitate public access to and use of the real property for hiking and other uses permitted by this easement. So that would imply that the parking should go in the improved portion as it states, but for both options 9 and 10, roughly half of the parking lot is in the unimproved portion, and that was the portion where that kind of activity is especially restricted. So those are examples along the lines of what Derek Ward has already said.
Thank you, Tom. So on our agenda, there are really two items, of discussion. The first is, this letter. And the second, if I can get to it, is a discussion, to recommend, an expenditure, of monies, from the open space fund for, the legal efforts that we're recommending, or potentially recommending, in 4A. So first, I want to ask, the committee, are there additions, deletions, rearrangements, recommendations associated with, the letter that is, currently, been drafted?
We need to think about this as two different issues, like one important issue is you really don't like the proposed parking areas because of all the reasons we just stated. And the other one is, do we want to acquire the property? But they're not, they're not the same issue. And so I think we need to kind of clarify that.
I hear your point. I think that the way that they've come together, when I reference the 3 years and particularly the last number of months, we have presented to Mid-Penn numerous residents and various committee members from a variety of committees have presented to Mid-Penn an interest in looking more carefully at the Little Trenchers entrance and the flat land. It is the obvious place to accept parking and minimal disruption. And drawing the line across the the boundary off the 13 acres that have been since named a historic complex have eliminated that option according to MidPen. So that was a hard no, which is what caused, well, there was another contingent in town that was more interested in, let's just open conference without parking. MidPen responded to that as well with a hard no. Given that those two options were ruled out and that they focused their energy on Alpine Road exclusively, which is, as last meeting showed, mountainous or a hillside, we were left with an alternative, one bad alternative or another bad alternative in trying to trade. The issue therefore is trying to be creative. We came up with an offsite parking plan, and now we are at like, why don't we solve the headache that Penn is facing and our own with the proposed acquisition? So it came out as a logical consequence. I hear your point.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be clear what the idea of acquisition is for.
Well, and actually, I think that, you know, potentially, you know, we could break this down, a little better, yeah, in that one is, you know, I think, you know, is the process, you know, why is the town being, you know, totally involved, you know, as the lead agency, you know, because the property, you know, will require a conditional use from that. And as a consequence, I believe the lead agency, you know, should be the town of Old Valley, you know, leading the sequel analysis. The second, you know, is challenging, you know, the basis for their plan, you know, which as known as, you know, so definitely describe, you know, reading the sections of the conservation easement, you know, that improvements, you know, should only be, you know, in the already improved portion of the property, and the other portion of the property should be left, you know, alone, you know, to protect their conservation value. And then I think thirdly, you know, is this potential opportunity that I suggested, you know, at our last meeting, you know, is to, you know, as the open space, you know, acquisition committee, I think we should see this as an opportunity to acquire this thing, you know, and then, you know, protect it, not dissimilarly, you know, that Mid Peninsula would. You know, would be doing it, and then, actually obviating the need, you know, the need of the, you know, the liability, you know, that the open space district, you know, has. And so, before I go on to other comments from the committee, I'd like to open this up, you know, for public comment. Nancy? This microphone works the best.
Is it on?
It's thank all of you for your time and energy and attention to this issue. And I had previously reviewed and read the conservation easement. And I refreshed my memory on that last night, reading it again. And there was no question that the conservation easement, which in multiple places in the document states it's supposed to be in perpetuity, meaning forever. I mean, Post doesn't get to say, well, the guys who gave us the property are dead, so we don't care, so we're not gonna get sued, because frankly, the more I got heated up thinking about them doing the grading and cutting down all the trees, I could almost get myself worked up enough to do there's a type of lawsuit which is a private attorney general lawsuit, where I would go in as a member of Joe Q Public to sue Post for violating a public trust. And they would be violating the public trust. One of the things that I wasn't
I hadn't focused on, and maybe I'm not clear enough on, is something Betsy just commented on, which is the historic nature of, and them declaring that there would be an historic category as to some buildings. I didn't see any strong prohibition in here about not ever taking down the buildings or doing anything in the buildings. It seemed to me that the emphasis was totally about conservation from a, let's monitor how the trees are, how the water runs. So it struck me that there was, and I think someone commented, if you know, I'm gonna jump in topics a little bit here, but I think someone commented about possibly needing more than one attorney. I think a good real estate attorney who is familiar with the public law stuff would be very adept at dealing with what I saw in reading this last night as 3 issues, which I think you guys brought up eloquently in your last meeting. And that was, first, as Betsy properly pointed out, the practical aspect of, so Midpen puts up their gates, close it. People try to pull in, they try to back out, they try to back out on the Alpine Road if you use the parking options from option 9 or 10. Well, that's a public hazard, so there's a practical aspect there. But perhaps even more importantly, as Carter, you're more in tune with this than anybody I know. The whole concept of them needing the conditional use permit. And one of the things that I'm not getting that Post has in mind is that this is residentially zoned property. They're treating it like we were just given a land grant for a hiking area. Well, they haven't been given a land grant for a hiking area. They've been given a piece of somebody's residential, very giant residential lot, but nevertheless, it's a residential lot, so it's going to require conditional use permit, it's going to require all kinds of permits, not the least of which is the grading and the tree removal. You get to the grading and tree removal, forget the fact that there's a conditional use permit. It may be that the town might even say, are you kidding? You're going to grade that much dirt? We're not going to let you do that. Maybe the town would let them do it. But behind all that, they are stewards of the conditional use permit, of the conservation easement. And conservation easement, I mean, I was really struck in reading again the conservation easement, that a requirement within it was that they make a catalog of all the trees, of all the plants. They even talk about how they've got, they talk about how they've got the valuable oaks, the valuable California buckeyes, the California bay laurel. They give high value to things that Post is about to say off of their head, and New Penn's about to say off of their head. They can't do that. So now the interesting question is, who would it be who would enforce the terms of this conservation easement? And if, for instance, any of the woods were around, they would step in and say, are you kidding? We gave you this property, we entered into this easement, we counted on you guys to protect the land and our trees and our plants. But here we go full circle to my comment about the private attorney general theory, which is, and the town could be a party, a party through their counsel, and that could be something that the attorney of the town maybe suggests to Midpen, that under the private attorney general theory, they might be looking to try to enforce the terms of the conservation issue easement, because I believe they've got the right to do that. But, it's, I like to walk the fact in paragraph L, Post says they will honor the intentions of the grantor. Well, they are not honoring the intentions of the grantor in everything we're planning to do here. The grading, the tree removal. So that's all to you guys, and if you need somebody to help, I mean, I'm not engaged in this thing now, so if you want me to help draft in anything or anything in that line or reviewing documents, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Karen. Karen Lasky, can you please fill up and speak in mind?
I think you guys all know that Zoom is working for, and it says that meeting is scheduled for May 7th on that link. That's why people can't get in, just FYI.
I was able to get in, but it was really, really
Wow.
hard to hear everything, so I hopped in the car and came down here, but.
Okay, anyway, that's not,
The preamble we got here is that, you know, that the towns had, you know, some extraordinary technical difficulties, you know, where the entire restaurant, you know, Zoom system that manages the cameras, you know, the televisions, you know, essentially all of the internet connectivity were damaged somehow, you know, with the power outage that happened this week.
There's camera.
Well, it might be the wrong Zoom number. We hear some people have the Zoom number, some don't, so.
you know what, it isn't anybody's, fault at this thing. It's a frustrating experience, but it is, let's not shoot the messenger sort of thing here. Anyway, I have not been very involved with this from the open space aspect, and I've been otherwise occupied, but what I wanted to share with you was a thought I had as it relates to the thought of hiring an attorney with the open space acquisition funds. Carter and I served on, and Nona served on the ad hoc site evaluation committee, of which Hawthorne's, the historic site, was reviewed, and actually our committee had that as an option for housing, you know, where the existing housing was. And I know in some mid-pen meetings that I've been at about the Hawthorne's historic property, one of the options for mid-pen is to sell the land, and they're restricted in what they can do. They can sell it to an entity like the town and some other things. So that has been talked about only for the historic side from mid-pen. And my thought is the town needs to be very creative right now while following the law on how to finance initiatives that we have. And if we hire an attorney to review the potential acquisition of Hawthorne's and the interpretation of the conservation easement and what, if we were to buy the property, we could actually do, I think that is an interesting idea. And looking at it so that we get to know what somebody could do on that property with the respect to acquiring it. And that's really all I'll say, because I have not been involved from any other aspect. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Moroni?
Thank you very much. Just want to say that I've been involved in this for several years now, and we actually put a petition together from the Portola Valley Ranch people that were opposed to this parking lot and the size, as well as the trail connection, because of the amount of people that potentially be coming up and using this very small property. They say it's 78 acres, but as you say, historic property is fenced off, so it's 60-some odd acres, and it's a mile and a half. And the proposal for 50 cars is equivalent to Indian Hill and a Rostadero, which get about 200,000 visitors per year. So if you're looking at a trail and a mile and a half, and you have 50 cars there, and each person brings 2 people, then basically when you're looking at people going around that trail, bicycles, horses, hikers, you're 20 yards apart from each other. It's really not open space that is what I think Portola Valley wants. So where they came up with the size of this parking lot, I think is a question I've asked multiple times and I've never gotten answered. And people on the PAW, which were the people that sort of developed this, asked that question as well. And there was no question except, there was no answer except that we are requiring a 50-car parking. In fact, originally it was a 75 car. So at least with the petition, I think we were able to get it where the board said, okay, well, let's start at 25, but we'll pay for 50, or we'll grade for 50, and then at some point, if we need the extra spots, we'll take it. So I think the town itself needs to figure out what they're gonna do with all those people on that property. I think that's something that the town council should look at. The point on the letter that I would make is that when they switch to options 9 and 10, they specifically went to posts and got the approval to use that unimproved area to do this grading and to do this tree cut. And so everybody in my little circle was asking, well, why, what did Post say? How did they, and Post would not answer any of the people who contacted them directly. They said, no, we're only talking to Midpen. So for whatever reason, Post gave the okay to Midpen, right? And Midpen administrators brought this up at their board meeting and said, hey, we have approval from Post to put these in. But as you guys have seen, it clearly violates the easement. So I think that as you write, as you hire your attorney should, I think, involve both Midpen and Post. And that you should be thinking about engaging Post as well, because I think to understand why that's gonna come out sometimes, either come out in a year or 2 years or whatever, but I think that you might as well cut it off right now. Thank you.
Maria,
That's Sandra.
you do, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm not, really familiar with the details. Yeah, close to the mic. Sorry.
My voice louder. Anyway, not familiar with a lot of the details. One of the reasons I'm here, and one of the reasons that I've come to a lot of the open space meetings through the years, is I think it's very important as a committee for you to think about the impact that the decisions that are made today, the impact that they're going to have on future donations to the town of land. So that is an aside. My other comments are just observations. As somebody who lives on Alpine Road, I don't know if Midpen has taken it into account, but you look at the mobs of bicyclists going up and down, running stop signs all the time. I would think that Los Francos perhaps is not quite as dangerous. Or maybe they need to have one parking area and an overflow parking area after seeing the amount of use that's being, how much the parking areas are being used. The other thing, and I have no idea how this might fall into things, but if they're anticipating so many people coming up here, that combined with the additional housing and low-income housing and all the other requirements that we have, could Post or Midpen or somebody apply a little bit more pressure to have some additional public transportation come and have a stop. To reduce the need for having so many cars there. Again, I don't live here full time, but that intersection at Alpine and Portola, I love the trees, the lupin that are up on the hillsides and all the rest of that, but it's a lot of people that run it. When it's schools in session, the amount of cars, the kids running up and down, and I just, wanted to share my observations.
Thank you, Ryan. Kristen?
I was looking at the maps and it looked like both the 75-foot setback was violated in both 9 and 10 parking. And that is not okay. It is just not okay. Because we are building, I couldn't build my backyard the way I wanted to because I had to do the 75-foot setback. So we're abiding to the rules, and why would others get these concessions? So it says in their natural resources purpose, AS 2.1, minimize the effects to Alpine Scenic Corridor, which 9 and 10 do not do. It cuts into the, I think they only put it 60 feet back. So when I asked the person drawing it, he said it's 60 feet because we don't want to cut too far in. So I'm going to propose something else. I think they passed up a parking place. Ideally, buses come in and they bring people and then we don't have all the traffic. That would be my first choice. If we had to have a parking area, we had tours and we parked, I believe it was parking number 4. And it was just not even considered, but you couldn't see it from Alpine Road. You couldn't see it from Los Trancos Road. And we went up and over the hill and down into a valley and you could not see 40 cars. I went to all 3 tours. So I think they should reconsider the parking area that was used for the tours. Ideally, buses come in and out and they drop people and it's by appointment and come to the area. I want everybody to enjoy it, but I think we can get there on bikes, bus, and walking and however else we could get here. I want people to enjoy the beauty of it. It has a 360. It's absolutely gorgeous. But you can see it from Alpine Road and they will be cutting into the bit of the boat. I'm pretty sure. And I think we need to relook at what does it mean to go 75 foot back? So you can put a retaining wall, you can put a bathroom. Who wrote that? And is this their interpretation of what can be done, or is it Portola Valley's interpretation of what we want in the town? Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, Nancy?
I just want to make a really quick comment in response to the idea that Post would give Mid-Penn permission to violate the terms of the conservation issue. Post does not have the power to do that. How arrogant is that? They simply do not have the power to say, oh, you can ignore the rules of the game. They just don't.
Could you remind us of the phrase, is it private, attorney general?
Yes, the phrase is the private attorney general. So if I, as Joe Q citizen, want to sue because there's some public injustice going on and no one is stepping forward, that there are very good attorney's fees clauses within the private attorney general in order to encourage people who don't have the funds to hire an attorney to go to engage, usually a public interest attorney, to sue for them, and the provisions for that, when that person prevails, there are very good attorney's fees provisions to provide for compensation to the attorney and for compensation to the person who took the time and energy to fight the battle.
I appreciate all your public comment. I think they're, valuable and very, very constructive things.
I want to ditto that really powerful comments that you all made. Thank you for following this so closely. You contributing such content.
But for me, it's actually, I'm considering a shift in the tact. So I'm gonna talk out loud for a minute, you know, because I haven't assembled the thought, and I'm thinking that if I blab a little, you know, something good might come out of it. So, because I think a lot of what, we as committee members, you know, have been concerned about are really kind of two basic issues. One is the sense that NIPCN, doesn't have the best interest of the land, you know, at heart. And two, it isn't, you know, isn't protecting the property the way it was intended in the conservation easement. And what, you know, we've talked about just recently, you know, in suggesting an enforcement action. Although there isn't any work being done, there's work being planned. To enforce, you know, the terms of the conservation easement, you know, and we should point out specifically that there's a prohibition, you know, of improvements, outside of the improved portion of the property. There's a prohibition, of removal of, you know, of live trees. And there's a prohibition on grading. And I think the biggest issue is not considering, you know, the improvements, you know, are only, or considering grading and parking in an area of the property, you know, that is specifically outlined in the conservation easement as being protected. And I think that what Nancy suggested with the private, you know, attorney general, you know, to you know, review the, you know, what's being planned, I think is appropriate. I think we should ask the council to enforce a stay on the planning, you know, of options, you know, 9 and 10. Provide Patrol Valley time to review its authority, you know, under the zoning ordinance, you know, and the grading ordinance and the traffic ordinance. All of these, you know, options right now would have significant effect, you know, on the open space character, on the safety of the town, and the aesthetics. So rather than recounting, you know, kind of, you know, the issues that have gone on, I think the open space, you know, committee, you know, should act as the catalyst, you know, to do something. I think the town has been sitting on its hands for a lack of effective construction, you know, and now, you know, the financial situation is in line, and that, you know, if we could catalyze this work, you know, with, you know, contribution from the open space, you know, acquisition fund, you know, to support the effort, you know, to get council, you know, engaged, you know, to potentially be, you know, this private attorney general. We can encourage, you know, the appropriate actions by, you know, the open space. I do believe the board of the open space probably shares our best interest concerns. But because of how big the district is and the number of acres and the number of employees that they have, you know, that staff that has pushed, you know, certain agendas, you know, regarding the amount of parking and so forth, you know, in response to maybe some internal, you know, needs assessments that they have, you know, that they think this property could, you know, potentially do. But I'm equally incensed, you know, to share, you know, Nancy's concerns, you know, about somehow getting an informal okey dokey, you know, with post. You know, to grade thousands of yards of dirt, you know, and take out, significant trees, you know, on an area of land that's prohibited from being improved. You know, the reality is that, you know, if the town had been effectively, you know, acting as the planning authority, we probably would have stepped in, earlier, in the POG process, you know, to say, wait a minute, guys, you can't do this stuff. And, I do think it's time.
It strikes me that there's a similarity between the types of cases I handled, where someone came in and said, I want to prevent this person from further encroaching on my EDC because they're obviously encroaching and it's wrong. And in some cases, the judge would say, wait a minute, you've let this go on long enough. You've let them rely on the fact that you're not going to object. And therefore, it would be too much of a hardship to have them set aside all this money, time, and energy that they put into, in this case, options 9 and 10. So we're not gonna make them not do that, because why didn't you speak up earlier? I mean, I have handled cases where the judge said, you didn't speak up before. So guess what? You're out of luck now because to their detrimental luck, they have detrimentally relied on your acquiescence. And that's my concern here. My concern isn't that we have an attorney who sues them or threatens to sue them, but we have an attorney that says, this is the position we're taking. And we don't want you guys to spend another dime or another moment focused on this without being aware that we are taking the position that this is just plain wrong. And we shouldn't be doing it this way. So that's why I think it's important that a communication go from the town to Mid-Penn saying, hold it, guys, be aware of our position.
Right. Well, Aaron.
So just.
Bill.
So
Just to share some context, and Betsy was on this committee way back when the POP started, there was a town manager committee, an ad hoc committee, which was representatives from impacted committees, that were supposed to inform the public and then provide input to Mid-Penn on the POP process. And I can't remember all of the comments that we made. But we started out with the fact that we didn't think they should be bifurcating the property. Betsy may remember better. So we started out with the fact that if the property shouldn't be bifurcated. We also questioned the parking area from Los Trancos, and there was a big study done by a consulting firm, I believe it was called Parametrics, that looked not only at speeds and sightlines, but also look at parking, minimums and maximums and what was going on with Windy Hill, overflow of parking there. And we also asked for the Alpine Trail to be wide. There were a number, I'm just pointing out, Nancy, that there were a number of things that came from this town committee that were requested. And not a whole lot of our input. They were very polite, but I don't think that much happened. I don't know if Betsy wants to comment on that too, but just to give you some historical context, it's been going on a long time.
got it, Council. I think I would stick to it as, I thank you a couple of letters that we received from residents who gave permission to read their comments into the public letter, and one of those addresses the issue of segmentation and piecemealing that Karen just referred to, that was a precursor question to so much.
I'll read these in with this. This is a note from Linda Olson. And the 27 Valley of Portugal Valley. I'll be unable to attend tonight's meeting as it's conflict with a significant Portugal Valley Main Street. I said this at the mid-plan meeting, but I will repeat it here. I'm very concerned that the Hopkins is being overdeveloped with a 79-acre mini boutique open space that many may only visit once, since it's so tiny. There is no need for a 50 max or 25 minimum in the parking lot, to begin with. I believe Midland wants the parking mainly for all the other trail access. I'm also concerned that the planned development seems to be piecemeal. The entire property needs to be approached in a holistic and integrated manner. One part impacts the other. I have other issues with the trails, but believe that, for now, since your focus appears to be on the parking. Thank you for all the work that you do with the town, and thank you for asking for our input. This is another, letter that was, delivered for our committee. It's from Landon Knox. I won't be able to attend tonight's meeting, but I'm sending you my comments. You may also use them or read them at the meeting as you see fit. I support your committee's proposal, especially the hiring of an attorney. Midland is violating its own environmental mission by overdeveloping this tiny parcel. Also violating the terms of the conservation easement, as you're aware. Here is some background information that may be useful for your committee or attorney. Over many months, I asked Midland to tell me how their plans complied with the easement. Their only response was that Post approves them. I went to Post with the same question. Their response was, talk to Midland. I wrote numerous emails, to Dylan Sunderland, Post Conservation Easement Manager, asking the same question. I received evasive responses. I arranged a meeting with Gordon Clark, Post President, and Tamara Galanter, the attorney advising Post on easement compliance. I pointed out the easement prohibitions, being violated by Midland. Not once would Mr. Clark or Ms. Galanter say why they believe there are no violations. The only response was Ms. Galanter offering generalities about the need for public access. Bottom line, Post and Midland are ignoring the easement's stated purpose and our town's values of preserving the land's natural state, habitat protection, and scenic values. They're ignoring the easement's specific prohibitions that prevent the kind of public access and land degradation that Midland plans. Midland won't hear our concerns, but Post blesses what they're planning. The attorney who is hired will know that Post has a legal obligation to enforce the easement. He or she will also know that under California law, there may be no person or entity withstanding to hold them to account. Nevertheless, a strong position by an attorney would certainly get their attention, which is why I'm so pleased to learn your committee's recommendations. We need to do what it takes to protect town values. Some additional very much in conflict with what you all are talking about here tonight.
Just
Betsy, do you have a comment?
a couple
You didn't raise your hand on Zoom.
a couple of points. One is one of our public speakers asked about the 75-foot setback, and just for the record, the 75-foot setback applies to buildings, but not to parking lots, as we can see at the fire station and such. So in that sense, there is compliance in that one sense. The other point I wanted to make, and this has come up in conversation is that the parking lot, location. The question is really, is a 50-car or even a 25-car parking lot located for a 1.5 mile, loop walk, well located relative to need? And for those of us who live here, we know there's a crying need for more parking over at either and both entrances to Windy Hill. So the significant investment in funds that would be required to build out this location, much more significant than building out larger parking lots in either of those locations. The investment and return value to transferring that parking to split between those two areas or whatever the intent decides to do would be, I think, a win-win for Mid-Penn hikers, users, the 750,000 people that they are trying to appeal to appropriately, and a win for Portola Valley.
Thank you. Jared, Superintendent Webb.
It's obviously a very important issue. Well, I really appreciate hearing it, not just from our community colleagues, but also from the community. And it's evident that, this is a very timely and important opportunity for us to advise council and the city manager, town manager, our concerns on behalf of our community. And time really feels like it's at the essence.
Jared?
I have to confess that I'm one of those that,
Would you like one?
oh. How about that? I have to confess that I'm one of those that wasn't paying much attention to the whole parking area. So I'm as guilty as some others around here, but I don't think it's too late to do something about it. Well, I can only put one word to this, it's travesty. The plans for those two parking areas. And I only realized it at our last meeting when Carter was pointing out, look at the contour lines. And look at the contours of the native slope right adjacent to the river. Take a look at the plans sometime. Contour lines that are, this far apart naturally are stacked. Cheek by jowl. So that last meeting, that Carter, you got me interested in. Well, I only quickly stopping this whole project, the parking project. I wonder if our letter, is our letters to the council strong enough? I mean, I'm saying we gotta stop it. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Well, it seems like people have voiced,
No, not.
yeah. It seems like a number of people have voiced their concerns about this over a period of time, so it's not like something that's just coming up right now. But I think we're getting forced into it a little bit by the deadlines, that Mid-Penn has. So yeah, I'm in favor of trying to make sure that parking lot does not occur there. It just seems like a stupid place to put it. And I don't know whether this is a little bit of an aside, but I don't know if anybody's done any geotechnical work on that slope to find out whether you can even do a cut that's that severe without having some land movement problems. Has anybody looked at the map in town, that's down at town center, to see, what's the composition of that particular hill? I mean, we see these landslides constantly on Highway 280, for example. They just don't stop. And so we don't want to get into a situation where something like that would happen. So I don't know if anybody's even thought about that aspect of it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know the history of all of this, but I mean, even if it seems kind of stupid not to put a parking lot in a place where people used to park. In a flat area, even if they think that it might be somewhat dangerous, there's gotta be ways to mitigate that. Especially if it's, there's not gonna be that many cars, and then it would be hidden from view, which would be quite a bit better than seeing all those cars up there. In an area that's not supposed to have anything.
Actually, the most basic part are, that the owners who get to the land, and you conservation easement protector, should be the ones doing what we're, what we're doing. They should be protecting the land. So, I want to stage kind of what I think, our, our actions tonight will be. Before
you do that, can I say one more thing?
Sure, I'm just gonna talk out loud, I'm just trying to.
You're not doing much.
I'm not doing, trying to assemble some thoughts. Is that, kind of the first action, that doesn't really need town council direction, is for the town manager, to immediately write, to, the manager of the Mid-Peninsula Open Space, not Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, and the Peninsula Open Space Trust, to express the town's concern, over the current planning process. And that our concerns are about, what looks like, an absence, or a disregard for open space protection and the conservation easement. I want the town manager, to request that, the Minutemen stop spending money on the planning process and to immediately make, a preliminary application to the town. Planning, building and planning departments, for the necessary, conditional use permit, and grading permits. And so the purpose for this, is to do what Nancy suggests, is to put a stake in the ground and say, whoa. This has been flying under the radar, you guys have been doing this planning stuff. But now it's looking like you get serious because you're talking about, hiring, a secret consultant. But you haven't even talked to us yet, about, what it is, how it fits, how to deal with, the zoning. Because it's not, the only uses that are allowed on that property are residential and accessory uses. Two residential uses. So, frankly, the open space, the fencing that they've done and the blocking off that they've done probably isn't legal. Because, it's doing things that are not, residential in nature. The other thing, and then the other part is to force them, to recognize that the town has authority, over what they're doing. The driveway locations, the grading, the drainage, the electrification, the utilities. I mean, there are a lot of places, even if, if the Minutemen has authority over what goes on the property. There's relationships, that they have a responsibility, to, seek approval from the town. Then segue to, what we want the town to do. We want the town council to support, the town manager, issuing, this correspondence. We want the town council, to immediately consider, with our potential funding, legal counsel, since our current legal counsel is conflicted out of, of dealing with which is probably another problem. That he has precipitated this quiet kind of, laissez-faire, is that the town manager, Kim Dennis, was conflicted out. And our current town attorney is conflicted out. So they're completely hands-on. And so, to me, this is an important distinction. Is that we've got a new town manager who is conflicted. And we need a new, at least project-based, if not, with this private attorney, potential future, a private, attorney, general. So, and then the third part is, recommending, that or support, providing open space committee support, for the expenditure of monies necessary, to fund these efforts. So that's really kind of the three levels of action that I think we should consider. And that kind of bonds together, the two actions in 4A and 4B. But I do believe that there's an emerging need, for communication, that wasn't part of, of the letter, the way it's currently written. And I'm not even sure if it needs to be a letter. I think it could be, just be potentially our action. Because I think this letter needs to go out before the end of the week.
Well, we can vote on it,
Yeah.
And
So,
so I agree with absolutely everything you said. I would not underline one thing. I agree with everything you said, except for it doesn't need to be a letter. I think getting our input and thoughts in writing was tremendously constructive. And I want to also add that there is, for all the people sitting here, I must have talked to 100 people who care very deeply about this project, and some of them were completely taken by surprise. Not everyone follows town goings on as we all do. But there will be shock and awe when this someday hits the newspapers or TV forum. So I want to speak particularly to the point, Harry, that you picked up Nancy's suggestion of urgency and drawing lines. When I was a newly dating teen, this didn't happen very often, but you've gone out with someone once or twice and you need to kind of let them down softly. And I was find a way to say no, thankfully, but no. And I want to apply that to our current position of the decision makers. Those of us on committees have been making our concerns known, but the decision makers for various reasons have taken a back seat. And in order to be super clear with MIPPEN is to be kind, is to say, don't waste the money and the time, and come back to us in a year with the kind of leverage that another $1 million is going to. So I wholly support the public comments tonight, and it's part of your main comments. Agreed. And Gary.
hungry though.
three quick points. One is our town manager, Darcy, has already reached out to me. Committees, and the response that she got was that the secret document will be available for public and agency review a year from now. So, she would basically, I think, told the city, yeah, so that's number one. And number two, regarding the need for parking, a number of town residents and committees have envisioned other parking options that would not have impact on apartments. And we talked about some of them at our last meeting, but there are others that we haven't even talked about yet. So I think that to the extent that parking is needed, and I think we all agree that we want there to be sufficient parking for public access, there are much better ideas out there. And then the third point I want to make is, for anyone who hasn't read Appendix B to this letter, I really urge you to do so, because it's not just the open space and it's not just the historic structures, it's how well they fit together and how much they say about the history of Portola Valley and the ability of people to sort of evolve on that landscape just in conformance with the landforms and water resources and things like that. I'll just read a couple of sentences. So I don't know how many people have read the entirety of the historic resources assessment for the Hawthorns, but it concluded, quote, "The property is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places as a historic district because it retains landscape features and structures that reflect the social, agricultural, and architectural history of San Francisco Peninsula estate property in the late 19th century. In addition, looking at our own historic resources inventory of the town, that is, the Hawthorns is the only entry listed for both historic structures and natural features. The Hawthorne House is the first architecturally designed house within the present town boundary. The olive trees may be the only remaining examples of olive groves in Portola Valley." And so to me, at least, this argues for keeping it one property and not for deferring the historic district the way Newfoundland has decided to do. It's an amazing property, and it really speaks to the town.
And that's it, such a comment, the flavor of landlord.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time making math and reading about this property.
I just had one quick point. You mentioned fencing, and I'm not sure if you're aware, there's about 1,000 feet of fencing being replaced along the west side right now on Sweet Springs Trail that Mid-Penn is doing. I don't know if they've got a permit. I don't know if they need a permit. You may want to ask your town manager to look into that. The construction is ongoing right now.
We did alert them to it,
Okay.
and the town planner said that there might be a code enforcement.
They're not, but that is gonna be,
They're aware of it.
okay.
I have a question.
Part of the last meeting, you were involved with the parking lot for Windy Hill. Another concern I have is that when we put cement on a hill, the runoff is quite great, and we know right in front of the Roberts that hill has fallen many times. I don't know, into the cycling area. So this is Alpine Trail. It's safety for our kids. They're walking down this road all the time from Puerto Madera. And if safety is number one of our council, that's one, I mean, it is number. So we need, and safe routes to school is very important to us. But I did want to say the Windy Hill parking lot is gravel, and I want to know the history of that. I think it was brilliant because the water can seep in and it's keeps the runoff away. So can you describe why that occurred and could that be a consideration if we have to go to this parking lot?
I don't remember precisely, obviously, but it was a combination of, you know, the lack of slope, you know, and it is an impervious surface, you know, it's not pervious. You know, it is a, you know, under improved. It is but it is an all weather surface in that parking lot. You know, it was, you know, probably, you know, related to cost, informality. There was a lot of, you know, town involvement, you know, from the ASC, you know, planning commission, you know, in the review of that. It was, you know, an important element, you know, in the conditional use permit process, you know, to allow, you know, open space use.
And then, to add on to that, as far as the new plan goes, Carter pointed out that the slope issues would mean that gravel was not workable. You wouldn't have traction during certain times of the year for sure. It is not just concrete, though, it's permeable concrete, so you would have, some level of absorption. Which is not to defend anything, just to point out that that's all the conflict.
So in an effort to, you know, kind of bring closure, you know, to items, you know, 4A and 4B. What's your pleasure? I know you've been taking notes, Nona. I don't know, you know, how we want to assemble this.
You raise the possibility of not sending a letter, and I guess the first question is, do we want to send a letter to council? And then go from there.
I'm really good with, you know, I don't think there was anything wrong with the letter, you know, as it was, you know, previously constructed. I think that, you know, the issue of, you know, the recommendations or the stage recommendation, you know, is primarily to express urgency, you know, concern, you know, and willingness, you know, to, you know, recommend expending funds, you know, on doing something, even in spite of, you know, financial crisis, you know, the town has, you know, is currently been. Because it is so important. That was written.
Yeah, we could add those 3 points, but I think the last point about providing funds, I think that's it in there. We urge you to provide sufficient funds from the open space fund for that purpose, and that gets to the next agenda item,
Right.
raising it, and maybe raise it more, I don't know. The other 2 points about having the town manager immediately write to planning post to express town concern over current planning, and to make ask them to make a preliminary application to the town for a conditional use permit. I think that makes sense. I think that, you
Yeah.
know, that's a kind
And there were
of.
a couple of additional things that,
Yeah.
that, you know, I would bring after that. You know, is that, you know, we feel there are deep residing problems with the current plan options. And that the segregation of the improved versus unimproved areas defies and degrades the historic and open space character. You know, of the unique historic, you know, open space characters, you know, of this property. Because these are things that I don't believe they're even thinking about, or think they need to attend to. I know there are planning commissioners, you know, that will, you know, talk about, you know, the segregation or the sequencing, you know, the segmentation of the SQL analysis. You know, when you've got multiple phases to a project. And it just reeks of, you know, planning problems.
So I recommend that we combine the elements, you know, of our agenda items 4A and 4B, you know, into one communication to the town council to, you know, that respond to our concerns associated with, you know, the ongoing planning efforts or lack of, you know, coordination with the town. As amended tonight for our conversation. I believe, you know, the last words and that, you know, to, you know, discuss the area of, in advance, just to bring that up.
Would you read the motion again?
I can't. I move, you know, that we, you know, combine the actions, you know, in response to agenda items 4A and 4B. To complete, you know, to be the letter, you know, that is currently being, you know, amended tonight. Such that it communicates the urgency. The concern that we have, you know, around the ongoing planning efforts, you know, at the Hoffman's property. I think the only other thing, you know, that we should probably emphasize in the letter is, you know, where it talks about the conservation. Yeah, I think we should be more specific.
Okay.
To attend to the prohibition, you know, of improvements in the unimproved portion of property. The protection of trees and plants. And prohibition of grading. Outside of the improved portion of the property. Because all of those would lead, you know, a logical response being to do those things where the property is already flattened.
Question, should the motion, rather than referring to the agenda items, actually include the $25,000 by name? And
I think it does, you know, in the letter.
no, we don't call out, in the letter, we don't call out 25,000, just that we urge you to provide sufficient funds from the open space fund for that purpose. We can leave it like that, which leaves it open to the town, and has discretion, maybe
Yeah,
have
I
to go
would
back
go.
to us. So leave it as it is, okay, thank you, okay. So it's then unlimited.
Well, or logically limited to, you know, to what is necessary versus.
Yeah, correct.
Versus giving somebody the opportunity to spend all of it
I think.
on something unvalued.
Yeah. I feel happy with that.
I agree.
You got a motion there, you know that?
So I'd second that.
Yeah. That's good.
If you're looking for a second, I'd second it.
Okay, I am looking at a second. The motion has been made and seconded. Is there, you know, a vote? Signify support by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Hearing no new business. I will do adjourn. 8:22.
Wow.
There's a lot of folks in town on top of this, huh?
Well, I think